YouTube, what's good? What's good? Welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be going over the Season 3 long range and close range meta at its current state. We've received a few updates kind of over the last few weeks that have changed a few weapons, kind of brought some a little closer together. And today we're going to kind of talk about what I think is kind of the hard meta, but some other viable options that are still going to be usable and fun, and where you won't be getting just super outclassed by what the hard meta is right now. So first, we're going to kind of go over what True Game Data says. So if you haven't used this website before, it's just truegamedata.com. You can throw other weapons into this chart and kind of see how they stack up against each other. So we're going to do that with the long range meta, the close range meta, and then I'll throw some sniper builds at the end. But just to be upfront, I don't really snipe all that often. It's something I more mess around with when I'm playing Resurgence or sometimes on Big Map, but it's just not something I do a ton of. So I'll throw some builds that I like at the very end. But first, we're going to take a look at the long range meta, how this stacks up with each other, and then we'll look at the close range meta and how those weapons stack up against each other. So I've kind of went ahead and added all of these weapons here into the chart that we're going to kind of go over first. And this is what I think is probably the most used right now. I know that there are some weapons I'm leaving off. I may try to take some out and throw some more in at a later point in the video just for the sake of having the classes in there. But these weapons that I've listed here are what I think is being picked up and used the most and are probably the most viable. So if you scroll down here, you can see the chart. So this is in time to kill, 300 health, and it's defaulted to do chest damage, but I do combination. Rarely ever do I feel like players are hitting all chest shots unless somebody's just not moving. You know, you're mostly shooting at a moving target, somebody that's shooting back at you and whatnot. So, like I said, I think the combination is probably the best for just comparing how some of these weapons kind of stack up against each other in a more realistic sense. So everything's color coded. So as you can kind of see, there's probably some weapons on here you guys didn't take into consideration just because they're not really being used all that much. So the way this breaks down for the long range meta is currently the TR-76 Geist is the highest TTK weapon up until 25 meters. As you can see, it drops off, and it's really in the middle mix up until this 36 meters, and then it drops off like really hard after that. So this is probably going to be more of a resurgence gun. I don't use it all that often just because I do feel like after that, this 25-meter range, I just feel like I'm tickling who I'm shooting at, not really doing a ton of damage. And if somebody else is using almost anything else on this list, you're going to die to them. So next, you can kind of see your Ram 7. So the Ram 7 did receive like a pretty significant nerf for the third time. But it's still good. You know, it's still pretty viable up to this 24-meter range and even up to this 43-meter range. But then after that, it drops off really hard and just becomes really weak past that point. The SVA, you can kind of see that's just this brighter blue one right here. Pretty good up into these mid ranges. But this, like I was saying, this is how all these stack up together. So I'm not really going to talk too much about what all these TTKs are. Just wanted to throw a few in there at first just so you have an idea of like what you're looking at here. And then, so let's show the close range meta. So I went ahead and selected the AMR9, the new FJX, the HRM, WSP Striker, RAM 9, and the MCW conversion kit. So you can go add attachments on all these weapons, but in my experience doing that, it doesn't really change any of the meta per se, as far as like the way it stacks up on the chart. So this is probably not what some of you guys expected when it comes to the close range meta. As you can see, the Jack Raven kit on the MCW is by far the best TTK up to 20 meters for a close range option. I believe it gets up a 600 millisecond consistent time to kill. So just for reference, a good close range TTK is going to be in that 600 to like 650 millisecond. So when you get below that, that's where weapons tend to be a little bit more quote unquote overpowered, I guess you could say. And that's where metas really aren't that fun because you have to use it, and nobody, in my opinion, really enjoys using something over and over and over again like that. It just kind of gets stale a lot quicker, to where you feel like if you're not using said gun, you're not getting any kills. You're just dying over and over again. So the only drawback about that conversion kit is it only has a 40-round mag. So if you run sleight of hand, it'll be pretty beneficial for you. The gun does feel a little bit awkward. I don't really like it that much. I've used it here and there. I don't really feel like it's that flexible of a weapon. So next you have your HRM9 is going to be your second best option. The times to kill are pretty close with these. And the HRM does really have good damage range after it falls off. And then your Striker 9 is going to compete with the HRM9 pretty close. And then from there you have the FGX Horus, which looks like it's only good up until about 7.5 meters, and then it just significantly drops off. WSP9 is going to be a very consistent damage weapon at all ranges. That's why it's really good for a sniper support, but where the MCW is sitting right now, it's probably not going to be the best. And then the Ram 9, they nerfed it pretty significantly in the Season 3 patch, where they took away the damage headshot multiplier. If you got one headshot at the pre-patch damage, you would have like a 590 TTK, I believe is what it was. So if you just landed one headshot in that mix out of all your shots, you were getting a much significant higher TTK than just about any SMG. But they've taken that away. Like I was saying in the beginning of the video, this is like the closest we've had the meta in a long time, in my opinion. So beforehand, you know, in your early Warzone 2, during Modern Warfare 2, it was always, you know, your RPK and I believe it was like the it was the Vector. If you weren't using those two guns, you were getting completely outclassed. So between the current long range and close range metas of Warzone, you have a lot of viable options that you can use that are still fun, still viable, and you're just not getting completely outclassed by one gun or another. So definitely take into consideration when I'm about to go over these builds that you can use anything on this list, plus probably 5 other long-range weapons, and still have a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and kind of get into some of the classes that I've built out for this video. I did them all in private match just because I didn't want to mess with any of my current Warzone classes. So first I'm going to kind of go over the hard meta and then what I think is kind of follows suit after that. And I'll do that for the long range first, and then I'll do the close range, and then I'll throw snipers in at the end. So your hard meta right now, best overall weapon to use at long range is going to be the SOA Subverter. This is the class that I currently use. It's going to be the TYLR8, Dozer Barrel, Bruin Heavy Support, 50-round mag, Jack Glassless. You can also throw the Choreo 2.5 times sight on. You can build this weapon a few different ways. If you like the iron sight, I suggest taking this off and throwing on high velocity. I personally don't like it without an optic. I think the iron sight is just a little awkward for me. It doesn't feel great shooting, and it kind of has this weird bounce to it that I don't really enjoy. But this build is very, very, very low recoil, very self-explanatory when it comes to how the recoil works. It's just kind of up and to the left. But when you get about halfway through the mag, it does kind of have like that jerk where it kind of jerks like that. So the more you use this weapon, the easier it gets. But I definitely feel like this weapon isn't super overpowered. It's very balanced. Probably the most balanced long-range time to kill that we've had in a while, whenever like our Ram 7 was just obliterating everything under 60 meters a few weeks ago. So next is going to be the BP50. This gun feels really, really, really good. Its only problem is it has a 45 round mag, but it's very, very, very low recoil, very easy to control. Probably more of a resurgence gun. Isn't really going to perform super well on big map, but it is fun to use, fun to mess around with. This is what I've kind of been rocking with it. You can mess around with some of this and maybe take off the Zeman compensator and put Cassis brake just to get a little extra bullet velocity. But as far as bullet velocity goes, anything that you can get above that 820 range, I would say, is a pretty comfortable amount. If you dip really much below that, you kind of run into guns not being as viable with such a low bullet velocity. So, but that's just kind of the drawback to using the Zeman and having that better recoil control. But since this is only a resurgence weapon, in my opinion, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. Next is going to be the SVA. I really don't like this weapon. I've never liked it. I didn't like it in multiplayer. I didn't really like it in Warzone at all, but a lot of people are kind of gravitating towards it because of the burst. So you can shoot once and it shoots 2 bullets based off the way the gun fires. And you can build it to have a really high bullet velocity. You can just spam the trigger over and over and over again. Very easy to control, very low recoil. Whenever you start to fire it in full auto mode, it gets a little weird. So it has a ton of vertical along with some visual shake. But if you can maintain like just the bursting of it, it's very, very, very easy to control. Long range, close range, it's going to perform very well. But this is kind of what I would suggest to use for the burst. If you were to try to use it just fully auto, you should probably take this off, throw on the jack glassless optic, take off high velocity, and put some sort of rear grip. None of the stocks or the rear or the I'm sorry, not a rear grip, but underbarrel. None of the rear grips or the stocks really perform that well on this weapon. Next is going to be one of my favorite guns. So just kind of like the BP50, the Holger 556 just doesn't have a big enough mag to kind of keep up on big map. Really good for resurgence. Has a really good damage value. Doesn't drop off super hard in those mid ranges. Keeps up at kind of even super long ranges. So this is the build. You definitely have to have the suppressor on this weapon because even with this on and the barrel, you're only getting an 819 meters per second bullet velocity. Any lower than that, this gun is not going to feel good on big map. So I primarily play big map. I do play resurgence, but these are kind of built more for big map than anything. Next is going to be, your Ram 7. Same build we've been rocking with. Still going to be very low recoil, very easy to use. It just kind of has that initial jump. And it's still good. It's not the best anymore, but it's still very viable to use if you enjoy the weapon. It's just not going to feel as good from like that 60 meter range as it once did before. And then kind of we have the next. What we saw was the best time to kill weapon up to 30 meters is the Geist. Has a little bit of a weird recoil pattern. Shoots kind of awkward, kind of wobbles to the left and up. Definitely play around with this build. I would not put an eagle eye or a longer range scope on this weapon because it just has way too much visual shake. The jack glassless optic works really well with this weapon, in my opinion. So next is going to be the TAC Evolve Array. Just to be transparent, I'm not really a big LMG fan. I think they all just feel really slow and boring. But this is going to be a really high damage weapon. Super easy to use. Very, very, very low recoil. Definitely geared more towards big map. I see a bunch of people use it on Resurgence, but I typically don't like it. Resurgence is a little bit more aggressive, fast-paced. And I just really don't like LMGs for that kind of gameplay. But if I'm going to play big map, I might use this a little bit. You could also throw on the Choreo Eagle Eye, probably take off this stock and put on an underbarrel for a little bit better visual recoil with that longer range sight, but I would stick to the jack glassless. Next is going to be the Bruin. The Bruin's kind of like a sleeper gun. People don't really realize how good it is. I personally don't like it just because it has a really weird recoil pattern. It doesn't really have a ton with the glassless, but I don't really like to use the glassless optic all that much. I'm definitely more preferred to use a longer range optic just because it's kind of what I've always used in Warzone. But the jack glassless is nice if you're only taking fights within that like 30 to 50 meter range, I would say. So give this a run, see how you like it. You can also throw the Zeman compensator on instead to get a little bit better vertical recoil, but I think it's just fine with the Cassis brake. The Cassis brake is kind of the go-to on almost everything. Next, we have the TAC Evolveray's little brother, the TAC Eradicator. So this weapon is really easy to use. It's good for Resurgence. It's good for big map. The only problem is the good time to kill on this weapon is only going to be when you land this initial spray. So it slows down the longer you shoot it. But if you land that initial spray, you're going to get a very fast, consistent time to kill. So keep that in mind when using this weapon. If you start using it and you're only feeling like you're breaking people's plates and not really getting very many downs, try to focus on landing that initial spray first. Couple honorable mentions that I didn't throw on the chart. MTZ 556. Fun gun. Feels good. Shoots good. Just kind of feels like a upgraded M13. Don't really love it. It has a ton of vertical and horizontal shake with just about every sight you put on it. So you kind of are burdened by using the iron sights. And I don't really love the iron sights for this weapon. It feels like it takes up a bunch of my screen and is in my face, and I just don't love it. Next is one of my favorite weapons to use. I didn't put it on the chart because I just didn't have enough space. It's going to be the STB 556 from Modern Warfare 2. They buffed this gun probably a few months ago, and nobody really noticed it or said anything. But this gun has a very reliable time to kill in that mid-range. You can also throw this longer-range scope on it and not get a ton of visual shake. Very, very, very low recoil. This is going to be the build that I use. You could probably change out this barrel for one of the other ones that you think feels more comfortable. I've seen a lot of people use this barrel too. I just prefer this one because it has better bullet velocity and recoil control. And then last but not least for like our long range meta, everybody knows this weapon, MTZ 762, sorry. Got nerfed a few patches ago, but it's still pretty good. You can also throw the Corio Eagle Eye on this one, and it's really not that bad to control. But its only problem is it only has a 30-round mag. So it's probably not going to be the best for big map. It's probably going to be better for Resurgence. So that's going to kind of conclude all of our long-range meta builds. So we're going to get into the short range next. First, going to be my favorite, the HRM. This build is very flexible. You've probably used it at some point. So you can kind of build this a few different ways. You can take off the barrel and put on the DR6 hand stop. I don't really like the DR6. It is good for all of your movement and aim down sight time, but I think the hit that you take for your hip fire and your tactical stance spread is really bad. So I prefer to put the barrel on, and it also gives pretty close to the same statistics as the DR6. So, but it also improves your hip fire spread, which is kind of important up close with an SMG because you may bust through a room or bust into a doorway, and you may need to hip fire a little bit before you can fully aim down sight. So I would just prefer the barrel. You can also take off high grain. It's not necessary, but it does help a little bit. I wouldn't say it's needed on the weapon. Next is going to be our Jack MCW. So this is what I currently have been using. Forgot to throw on the 40-round mag with this one. So this is what I've currently been using. This is what feels the best to me. Like I said, this weapon does feel kind of weird. It kind of aims down sight weird. It doesn't really have the best mobility when you're tack sprinting around. Hopefully that new stock that they added in this week that you can get from the weekly challenges helps a little bit. But I'm not sure what attachment you would sacrifice. Probably the sight, but the iron sights of this weapon are really kind of just not good. They just look really ugly. They bounce in your face a lot, and I don't like them. So I prefer to use the NIDAR scope. Next, Striker 9. Really like the Striker 9. Just don't like the way it shoots, but it is very mobile. And that's what I think I like the most about it, is it's very mobile. Has a really good tack to sprint feel. And doesn't really have a ton of recoil. Kind of has that little bit of horizontal shake when you start to really fire about halfway through the mag. I see a lot of bigger streamers use it with no stock, but I feel like with no stock, it just completely obliterates all of the recoil control that you have. It's still controllable, but it's really only good at this really, really, really close range. That's just my opinion. Feel free to build it however you want. I just think this Lockman MK2 stock is a perfect balance of that mobility and aim down sight time without sacrificing so much recoil control. Next is going to be a weapon that I know a lot of people like it. I hate it. I think it feels like shit. I don't like the open bolt delay where it doesn't fire kind of like right as soon as you shoot the trigger. It's also not very forgiving. So if you miss a couple of your shots and somebody's shooting back at you, there's a really good chance that you might go down. It's a not very forgiving weapon just because of the slow fire rate. Most of the slow firing rate weapons are not very forgiving in general. So next is going to be the Ram 9. So like I stated earlier with the Ram 9, they really nerfed this weapon when they took away the headshot multiplier. It's still good to use. It had horrible sprint to fire time, which is really important for an SMG, but they've kind of buffed that a little bit, and I've added some attachments to help. So this is what I currently use. The Recon Comb is going to help a ton along with the DR6. You could also probably change out either the pad or the DR6 and put on the Armistice light barrel because it does have so much better sprint to fire speed. And next is going to be what was the meta for about 3 weeks. They've nerfed it. Thank God, because that was not fun after about a day. It's going to be the Renetti conversion kit. It's still good. Still feels good to use. Still shoots really good. But if you hit one leg shot in the mix of this weapon, it jumps the TTK from about a 630 to about 700. So, like I said earlier in the video, a really good balanced TTK is in that 600 to 650 range. When you get a little bit higher than that, stuff becomes not as viable. So keep that in mind when using something like this. You're going to really want to try to aim for the upper body because, like I said, if somebody jump shots in your face and you shoot them in the leg, you're probably going to lose that fight. Just because that time to kill goes down by so much if you just hit one leg shot. So that's going to kind of conclude all the weapons that I currently enjoy for the short range meta. So as far as like snipers go, like I said, I don't really snipe a lot. This is just what I prefer to use if I do. Going to be the XRK Stalker. This I think is probably the best sniper out still. I think it's just gotten really stale to use, so which is why people have kind of gravitated more towards the Moors sniper rifle, but the same build as normal. You can do a couple different things with this. You can take off the scope and put the Razor Hawk laser. You can take off the scope and put the bolt. If you put the bolt on, you can lay down a few more shots quicker than normal. This gun still one shots up until I think it's 70 meters, 75 meters or so. But I prefer the SPX sight. I think it has the best crosshair. Doesn't aim down sight super slow, but you can definitely, like I said, take off the sight, put the Razor Hawk on. You get a little bit faster sprint to fire and aim down sight speed. Next is going to be my current favorite sniper, the Moors. I think a lot of people are really loving this sniper right now. I'm honestly glad they put it in the game. Feels really good. Feels just like it did in Advanced Warfare if you played. This is the build that I've been rocking with. I know some people like the charge barrel, but they just nerfed the penetration of the charge barrel. So it's not going to be as good, in my opinion. Oh, it just kicked me out of the private match. Okay, I'll just go back to my Warzone class because I have that pulled up still. So more sniper. I also use this locust scope. I like that. Pretty good too. As I was saying, I'm not really a fan of the charge barrel. They just nerfed the penetration on it, so I don't really think it's all that good anymore. Highly suggest using the quick bolt on this weapon. You can also take off this sight or the laser sight and put the stock on. The stock's pretty good too. I just think I prefer the laser on this for aim down sight time. But if you throw this quick bolt on and you run sleight of hand with this weapon, it rechambers incredibly fast. Like you essentially are never reloading it. And that's how fast it is with no sleight of hand. This is just the speed of the bolt. So if you throw sleight of hand in the mix, you can really lay down shots consistently and get one-shot kills. Or if you break somebody at long range, you can get another shot on them really quick. So like I said, I don't really snipe all that much. This is what I enjoy using probably the most as far as when it comes to what two snipers. Don't ask me for a cat build. I hate the cat. I don't like it. I think it's boring and slow and bail out and insert insult about the gun here. I just don't like it. So feel free to try any of these builds out that I showed you previously in the video. Like I said, I don't know it all. I don't think that any of these, other than the Subverter and the HRM, are hard meta. So you can use any of the weapons that I listed, and they still be fun, viable, easy to use. You'll get consistent TTKs, and you can change your playstyle to the weapon that you're using. I think all those factors kind of make what the meta is, especially the consistency and the ease of use of said weapon. So if you enjoyed today's video, please leave a like, subscribe if you'd like to come back. Anything is greatly appreciated. I'm trying to grow on YouTube here. I'm not really a long form uploader. This is kind of my first super long form video that I've done. Hope you enjoyed. Have a great rest of your day.